Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Today's scripture is from the Message, from the book of Isaiah, chapter 65, verses 17 through 25. Pay close attention now. I'm creating new heavens and a new earth. All the earlier troubles, chaos, and pain are things of the past to be forgotten. Look ahead with joy. Anticipate what I'm creating. I'll create Jerusalem as sheer joy, create my people as pure delight. I'll take joy in Jerusalem, take delight in my people. No more sounds of weeping in the city, no cries of anguish. No more babies dying in the cradle or old people who don't enjoy a full lifetime. 100th birthdays will be considered normal. Anything less will seem like a cheat. They'll build houses and move in. They'll plant fields and eat what they grow. No more building a house that some outsider takes over. No more planting fields that some enemy confiscates. For my people will be as long-lived as trees. My chosen ones will have satisfaction in their work. They won't work and have nothing come of it. They won't have children snatched out from under them. For they themselves are plantings, blessed by God, with their children and grandchildren likewise, God blessed. Before they call out, I'll answer. Before they've finished speaking, I'll have heard. Wolf and lamb will graze the same meadow. Lion and ox eat straw from the same trough. But snakes, they'll get a diet of dirt. Neither animal nor human will hurt or kill anywhere on my mountain, says God. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word.
Today's message is going to look a little bit differently. This has become kind of a tradition we've done the last 2 years, I think, of the first Sunday of the year. Are you sitting on the far side, Jamalyn?
Haven't made up yet.
Oh, okay. This has kind of become a little bit of a tradition where we begin the first sermon of the year by sharing it and giving our reflections on the year that was and the year ahead. And I just want to comment real briefly on the passage that Jim read for us. I love those words. Behold, I'm creating a new heaven and new earth. And how he says, look forward, anticipate with joy what I am creating. When Jamalyn and I lived in Haiti, one of our favorite one of the biggest holidays in Haiti is New Year's Day. Not just because it's New Year's, but because it's also their Independence Day when they celebrate. So imagine July 4th and January 1st being combined in our country. That's what it's like in Haiti. And actually, the New Year's Eve service in Haiti, it felt like a Christmas Eve service at the Catholic church where we lived. I mean, the whole village turned out. There was this excitement, this buzz in the church building. And the priest who led the service is a man named Father Joseph, who is kind of an organizer for the community. He's was born and raised, so he has a long history in Fondois. And so I remember our first New Year's Eve, and this particular passage was read. Behold, I'm creating a new heavens and a new earth. And there's something about hearing those words in that context that made me aware of how earthy, how grounded these promises are of Isaiah. New heavens and new earth, but what does he promise? The people will build homes and inhabit them. They'll not build for someone else to take. They'll plant fields and enjoy the fruits of their labor. It won't be they plant fields and some other enemy takes that away. And even the image isn't of eternal life. The image is of people who live 100 years. Someone who dies before 100 will be considered, a shame. Like so they're not even, it's just different from the pie in the sky, the golden streets, pearly gates, all those things that we kind of grew up in. It's the image that Isaiah paints is of a of a society and a world where everyone flourishes. And anyway, so hearing it in that context, it kind of reminded me in Haiti of like God cares about our hopes and our dreams. And so what the priest would do, Father Joseph, and he did it, I don't know if they still do it every year, but in those 2 years we lived there, both services they did, where he invited people to share, what did you celebrate from the year before? How did you see God working? And then when you look ahead to the year that's coming, what hopes do you have for the year ahead? And I remember different people from the community would stand up, and again, their hopes and dreams that they shared, they weren't like crazy. I think the biggest dream was one of the kids from the orphanage said, I just want everyone to have enough food in the coming year. I remember one young man had just got a home, and he said, I just want to paint my house in the coming year. Like that was the grand scheme of his hopes and visions. I just want to be able to paint my house, you know. But as we listened to all of their hopes and dreams, again, for me, there was just this awareness that they were caught up in Isaiah's vision of a new heaven and a new earth, that God cares about our hopes and our dreams. And God is constantly making new things happen, even when we're not aware of it. So anyway, as we kind of go into New Year's, that's kind of what I invited Kim and Ashlea and Jamalyn to do. And Pastor Seth and Pastor Perry couldn't be with us today, so they pre-recorded a few thoughts and put them on video, so you're just going to hear from all of us. And the question I asked everyone, I asked two questions. The first question was, what surprise did you have when you look back on the previous year? What was a surprise to you? And I did say it didn't have to be a good surprise, because we had some bad ones too. So what, good or bad, what was your surprise? And then the second question is, what hope do you carry for the new year? And so I'm going to hand it off. I don't know who wants to go first, but what surprise did you have last year?
I guess I'm going first.
Okay.
So I'm sort of a glass half full kind of person, so I tend to look at things that way. And the surprise for me was that people were able to name their challenges and then ask for help. You know, we saw athletes and celebrities and people just like us sort of saying, hey, I'm struggling and I need some help. I think that the pandemic caused us to rethink and redo and change a lot of things, and I think that in doing that, we were able to realize how resilient we are. And once you can bounce back from adversity, I think it increases your ability to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so I think people just sort of leaned into their vulnerability and asked for help, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I think Simone Biles, Osaka.
Yeah.
I mean, like those are some big. But you saw it even, I'm sure, as a therapist in your day-to-day work.
Yeah. So that was a great surprise for me, that people are saying I need support and actually getting it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess you're next, Ashlea. We don't have to go in the line, but
So, if I look back over the last year, I think my surprise was how much change we're all still experiencing. Right? Whether it's planned or unplanned, it just seems to keep coming. And maybe that's from my own personal life. We just had a lot of changes, just transitions of a child going off to college for the first time. I mean, we had two kids who had medical diagnoses that have become life-changing. Nothing severe or terminal or anything, but just where it changed our everyday life. And I've just known so many people who have had changes that it's taken a mental toll on them and an emotional toll, but to Kim's point, they are seeking help. And so, I am also a very optimistic person, and so I was like, well, this is pretty down what I'm saying, but it is so good to see people stepping up and saying, I need to care for myself. I'm not in a good place. I'm not in a good place mentally, emotionally, or physically, and I need to care for myself. So I think, just kind of adapting to the changes that's still happening.
Yeah. I feel like we have a theme going here, Jamalyn.
Well, mine is a little more personal. So I think the surprise for me last year is that your body is really in control, that you can try and plot and think through different ways to get over whatever you're dealing with, but at the end of the day, your body really is going to be making all the decisions. So last January, I went to Haiti and came back and lost my sense of smell and assumed that I had COVID and did not have COVID. And after a series of CAT scans and MRIs and other major tests, found out I had a weird defect.
Still don't like that word.
I still don't like that word. But there wasn't anything I could do. Like, I was gonna have to have surgery. And so what turned out to be one surgery turned out to be two, turned out to be three. And so my big surprise was, one, that it doesn't matter, you can't really talk your way out of some serious surgeries, but also what it really means to be part of a community and the body of Christ, and being willing to let people help you and come into your home and take care of things that are, clean your toilets, which is kind of embarrassing, and just different things like that over the course of the year, I tend to like to really take care of things myself, but I had to really surrender to my body, really, and do what my body said I was going to have to do.
For the record, I sometimes clean toilets. I didn't want everyone to think, like, Dave doesn't do that. Like,
You're a unicorn, then.
but I'm sure there are some times, we did have so much help in lots of ways.
Well, you were working, so it wasn't like...
Yeah, we had tons
We
of
can
help.
talk about tomorrow at our therapist appointment.
Kim, when are you available?
Yeah. It's hard to believe Dave and I are celebrating 19 years this week.
Yeah, on Tuesday, yeah.
Tuesday. Yes, thank you for the applaud. That's also my surprise for the years. We've made it 19 years.
Oh, well, let's hear what Pastor Seth and Pastor Perry had to say for their surprise.
One of the things that surprised me this past year is how much things have changed, and yet how much they've stayed the same. Now, what do I mean by that? One of my friends likes to say that this pandemic has not really changed things, but that it has simply accelerated them, that it's revealed them. And in many ways, different things that were going on in our lives, our society, have simply been sped up by this past 2 years. For instance, there's already division in our country and our society, and yet this last year we've seen that division get even worse. There's been a long-standing trend of people becoming more and more individualistic and more isolated, and we've seen that same thing really pushed to its brink in this last year. And for the church specifically, there's been a long-standing trend of people being more and more disconnected, of being less and less connected with a community of faith, or if they are involved, less active, less religiously affiliated. I really hope that this past year would be an opportunity to move away from that we'd really lean into who God has called us to be as the church, and yet I find that we're still kind of in that same place that it has proceeded along. And so it really puts us in kind of a place of limbo in many ways in the church in America, where we're not really getting back to what was, and yet we're not sure what's next. And so I find myself praying a lot more, and specifically asking God, what are we called to do? You're the God who brings beauty from the ashes, so what are you calling us to do?
A surprise I had over the last year was really more of a not-so-good surprise. Some of you may know that Jill and I, over the last year, were building a new home out in the Whitestown area. Everything had fallen into place perfectly. We even sold our current home and were able to stay in it until our new home was ready. But due to supply chain issues, we ran into problems getting things that they needed for the house. So that pushed our closing date back from the end of June to the end of July, and the end of July to the end of August. But the surprise came when our purchaser, or the buyer, needed to get into our existing home sooner than they thought. August 1st, or the first week in August, they needed to get in. So that meant that we were going to be homeless for about 3 weeks. So that left us trying to find a place to stay. Well, a surprise came when a friend told us that we could use a friends and family discount at their hotel, which was a chain hotel. And she worked for this hotel chain, and we got that friends and family discount. And we went to check in at the hotel, and we got another surprise. And this surprise was that we'd been upgraded to a suite. So we got to stay for 3 weeks in this little suite in this hotel, and it worked out really well for us.
Terry, I love Terry. And I think he lifted us all up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's funny, I'm kind of an optimist too, generally by disposition, and so I think my surprise is I honestly didn't think we'd still be dealing with COVID. I know that sounds awfully naive, but I go back a year and I think where my mindset was like a vaccine's available, it's coming out. All we have to do is wait for it to, like, my age bracket or my time to come, and we're all going to get vaccines, and we're just going to snap back, and and I didn't, I remember there being whispers of variants and stuff, but I didn't take it seriously. I didn't really and then Delta and now Omicron, and so I would have never thought a year later we'd still be wearing masks in public in a lot of places, and that we would be kind of dealing, in our, over the holidays, we had 2 different sister-in-laws who diagnosed with COVID, and so it just kind of felt like, oh my gosh. And so Jamalyn and I were listening to, are any Jim Gaffigan fans in the house? A comedian. So he has a new Netflix special, and I was watching it one night, and he was talking about this, and he said, this is the analogy he used. He said, 2021 or COVID, he's kind of, first he said, it's like that show that gets canceled and picked up by Netflix, which I thought was kind of funny since he was on Netflix's special. But the analogy he used is like, as a parent, you have that night where, in the middle of the night, your infant has a blowout, like just a really terrible blowout, and you have to, take the clothes off and the diaper off and clean them up, and you get the new diaper on and the new onesie on, and just as you're laying the child back down in the crib, you can hear their diaper filling all over again. And he said, that's 2021 over and over and over again. and I laughed at the time. And then on New Year's Eve, we had Nathan's friends came over to the house. Margaret went over to some friend's house. But Nathan's friends, we told the parents we're going to bring them all home after midnight. And so we rang in the new year and, had a little fun. And then I had to take the kids home. And so I put the dogs outside to walk them one last time before I left the house. And then our puppy got wrapped around a tree, with its lead, and so I had to walk out and undo it, bring it in, and I waited a few minutes while Nathan's friends came downstairs, and then I drove him home and got back to the house around 1 o'clock, in the morning, and as I walked in the door, there was a perfect brown footprint right by the front door, and I recognized the tread. It was my shoe. And when I'd walked out to get the dog and who was wrapped around the tree, I must have stepped in some poop, and then it was on. I checked my shoe, sure enough, there it was. And I had walked all through the first floor of our home, waiting on my son's friends to come down. So like literally 1 a.m. in the morning.
I got a surprise. Dave found out where the mop was.
Yeah, I was like, Jamalyn, where's the mop?
Nathan comes upstairs.
And so
that was my gift for the year.
So I'm mopping the ground floor, and I was like, this is a fitting metaphor. The final kiss from 2021. Goodbye this year. So that was, I don't know. So it doesn't sound hopeful, but at least you could laugh at it that this stuff, this was kind of a tough year in a lot of ways. So
I would have used a different word if we weren't in church.
But we're in the church, so we're pivoting to hope. And I'll go first with this. I think when I look ahead to the year ahead, I think 2021 was about resiliency, and it was about patience and grace, and those kinds of. And I think we'll need that resiliency and that patience and grace to kind of keep moving forward into the year ahead. But I think for me, what I kind of keep coming back to is I'm looking for what's new. What's the new thing that God is creating? Kind of what Jim read, that God's creating a new heavens and a new earth, and it's present progressive, like always doing this. He's always creating something new. And I think sometimes I get stuck, maybe you guys feel it too, of like, can't we go back to what was? Can't things just be the way they were? But they can't, because God's not in the business of leading us backwards. God's in the business of leading us forwards, right? Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, I mean, it's God's moving us forward. And so we have to kind of, I guess for me, what I'm trying to do is learn to be hopeful, expectant about what that new thing is going to be. And not be fearful of what that new thing is going to be. I mean, yes, as Pastor Seth was saying, it's a sea change as far as what church looks like, and that's weird, but I think the fundamentals are still there. People still need to be in relationships in places where they're seen and known and loved, and we all need to be encouraged in our faith, but where we do that and how that happens, it may look different in the future, but maybe God is creating a new thing, and we need to trust and be open to it. So my prayer constantly is trusting God's provision and God's leading, because if God does those two things, he provides for where we are and he leads us into what's in the future. That's kind of my constant prayer for us as a church and for me selfishly as a pastor, as a person. But I continue to pray, trust for God's provision and leading as we go into whatever new may come. We don't have to go in order. So let's break up the order, shall we?
Well, let's do it.
Ooh, I don't know. That makes me feel weird.
We'll go to the middle then. Ashlea, what's your hope?
So I guess the word that kept coming to my mind for the hope was love. And I thought, well, that's just kind of generic. But it's not just this feeling that we all have, right? You say, I love pizza, or I love this or that. But it's this deep sacrificial love that God calls us to. And it's looking at each other as a child of God. And it's making the choice to engage in the hard conversation, making the choice to realize somebody else's viewpoint. And we don't have to agree. That's not what it's about. We all have our differences of opinions in the way we do things, and it's in our homes and workplaces and schools, but we can still love one another as God calls us to love. And so I think that is my hope, is that we can look past some of this anger and this division and really live into how God calls us to love one another.
Well, I have, for the majority of my life, had an issue with overdrive, if you will. So I don't rest well, I don't sit well. I think that was one of the surprising things, again, from last year, is when I was recovering from all my surgeries, I had to sit. And so I've been trying to figure out what my hope is for this next year. And I think what I have come to realize is Dave and I live on a corner lot in our neighborhood, just as you're kind of pulling out of the neighborhood. And so I see people going back and forth all day long. And I know what it's like to be a young mom with little kids, trying to work on your career, trying to make sure that your kids are not watching too many screens or not eating processed food. And just for the record, if they do those things when they're little, they'll still graduate from high school. I promise you.
We don't know yet.
We don't know yet, but it's going well for us because our kids did all those things. But I look at everyone coming and going, and I always think, I wish I could tell everyone just to calm down, because I've been in that role. And so my hope for this year is to understand better how I can engage in wholeness, and how I might be able to express and to others who are really struggling with those things of coming and going and the busyness, that it's okay to be average. I think we need probably more average people in this world, and I know I'm talking to totally the wrong crowd in this congregation, but my hope is that people will just exhale, including myself, and that we can all be okay with being just average, maybe not having the most lucrative job in the world, but also just being fine with our kids being fine and all of those things. So for me, I'm trying to figure out a way that we can, with our health, feel whole, with our mental health, feel whole, with our activities, with what we do in the world. And my hope is that we all can just be content with fine. I know that doesn't sound very hopeful, but it feels really hopeful to me.
That's good.
So Kim, as the therapist, could you kind of walk us through how I'm feeling right now?
Yeah, we'll do that in the podcast. You'll have to wait. So my hope, I've been reading a lot about synchronicity, which is basically coincidence, godsidence, whatever you want to call it. So my hope is that we would get quiet enough to notice the synchronicities in our lives and become the beloved community that God wants us to be, that God created us to be. It's kind of what we're all talking about, so that synchronicity thing is
Wait a minute, Kim, that's what I wanted to say. I want to say what Kim was saying. It sounds smarter. I want to do synchronicity.
You want to be average. She's going to use big words.
See, this is the problem I have.
One big word.
I'm too ambitious. I want mine to be better. I want to be synchronicity. That's what I'm going for.
Oh, I have known Jamalyn
What
for
is the
such
word
a
again?
synchronicity.
Oh, that's too much.
Just say coincidence. Same
Okay.
thing. Anyway, I want us to I want us to relax, basically what you said, and notice how God is always present with us, how God is always calling us to this new thing that Isaiah talked about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and that we would say yes to what God is calling us to.
Kim and I have a podcast. So if you're wondering, we talk about the sermon after the sermon this next coming week.
Yeah, it should be good this week.
Except
you won't be there.
You won't be there.
Well,
Ashlea is
I'm gonna
guest.
be there.
I can't say
We
the
can
word.
evaluate her.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't say the word, so I shouldn't be there anyway.
Well, let's see what Pastor Seth and Perry have
Oh,
to
I
say
forgot
about their
about
hope.
them.
Yeah, they're here. They're here just virtually. So what do they have to say?
My hope is that as we move into this new year, we move forward as a church and as individuals with open hands, open to ways that God might work and move in and through us. Because when things are uncertain, when they're broken, when they're difficult, the temptation is for us to grasp very tightly, to close our hands. In reality, it's times like these that remind us that ultimately we have to place our trust in God and place our lives in His caring hands. We naturally want to hold on to things more tightly when things are uncertain or when they're difficult, and hold on to our desires or how we think things are going to end out. But it's in these times that we have to trust in those greater promises, knowing that in spite of the challenges, the struggles, that God will be faithful.
For hope, my hope is that we can get hate and anger under control in our broken and hurting world. As a church, this is something that I think we can help with. We have an opportunity to model true Christian love to our neighbors and to our friends. We don't even have to travel or go anywhere really to do it. We could start right in our own homes, right in our own neighborhoods. And I can't think of a better way to start a new year than to do just that.
So I don't know what your hopes are for the year ahead, what surprises you had in the year that's passed. I'm going to try to wrap all this up with an email that I received right before Christmas. And it kind of actually connects to everything we said. There's a consultant we've worked with here at the church. Her name is Susan Rossi. And she sent an email out that was kind of a group email to all of her clients, with kind of a devotion or meditation. And she was comparing expectation with expectancy. Not quite as big a word as synchronicity, but she was comparing expectation versus expectancy. And she says, they sound similar. They even look similar, but there's a difference between them. And here's what she wrote. She says, expectations are defined. They may be very tangible, like measurable goals. Or they may be a bit more intangible, like behaviors and attitudes, but always expectations are defined, and they don't provide much, if any, wiggle room. Expectancy isn't quite as defined, though. It's not held so tightly. I'll complete the project by this date. That's an expectation. But there may be a few additional items that I discover that need to be addressed that'll make the outcome even better. That's expectancy. Expectancy gives you a bit more anticipation and hope for the unknown. It's believing that something good will happen without having to define what that good thing is going to be. And then she closed by saying, I need both in my life. Expectations, so that I have something to drive toward. But expectancy, so I don't miss something even better than I could have ever imagined. And so I think about the year ahead, and I think it's really easy sometimes to get caught up with expectations. Like, I think that's kind of what you're talking about too, Jamalyn.
That's exactly her email. She took that from me.
She took it from you. Straight out of your head.
Straight.
Yeah, but I think, we tend to keep driving towards expectations. And Andy Stanley, pastor of North Point Community Church, he uses this thing. He says, expectations, when you have expectations, especially in a relationship with someone, there need to be expectations, but they're mostly transactional. I do this, or I expect this, and I get this in return. They're transactional. What expectations don't do is they don't express intimacy or love. You load up a relationship with expectations, you squeeze out all room for the giving and receiving of love. You don't express gratitude when someone hits expectations. You're like, yay, you hit the bar. Now here's what I want next time. You just raise that bar a little higher. But when you have expectancy, then you're looking, you leave space in the relationship. You leave space in life where you can still be surprised, where you can still receive a gift that you didn't see coming, and you can express gratitude for that gift that you received. Expectancy just leaves space. And I guess that's kind of what I wanted to say for us as a church and for me as a person, as I look ahead to 2021. 2022, yeah, right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
See, that date, Larry Fry and I were talking about this. I always forget to change the date. As we look ahead to 2022, we have to kind of let go of some of our expectations in order to make space for expectancy. I wrote back to Susan and told her how much I liked her devotion. And she wrote back to me and she said, as I wrote it, I kept thinking about Mary and Joseph. What if they had stuck to expectations? All the pictures they had for their beautiful life. What if they had stuck to expectations and didn't grasp hold of expectancy when the angel appeared? What if in our faith we hold on to expectations and leave no room for expectancy for God to show up? My hope is for all of us that we can leave space for expectancy, that we can leave space to be surprised by hope, by the good things that God is doing in our midst, that we might be able to see it and pursue it. And so as you look ahead to the year, I'm not sure what expectations you have. I think we all have hopes and dreams, but I hope we can all take those hopes and dreams we have and trust them to God and keep our eyes open, because God might just give us something better than we ever even thought to ask for. We're going to close our service with a time of communion. But one of the things John Wesley did, Tracy talked about John Wesley at the beginning, was he encouraged all Methodists as we begin a new year to have a covenant service, to commit ourselves to God in covenant for the year ahead. And there's a specific prayer that he wrote, the Wesleyan covenant prayer. It's in your hymnal, number 607, if you want to look it up. We're going to have the words on the screen. But Ashlea is going to lead us in this prayer, but before we do, I just invite you to take a few moments of silence, right? To be still with God, to lay before him whatever is on your heart this morning as you kind of look back on the year that was, as you hope for the year that is ahead. So I invite you into a time of silence, and then Ashlea will lead us in saying this prayer together.
Please join me in the Wesley Covenant prayer. I am no longer my own. but thine. Put me to what thou wilt, rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed by thee, or laid aside for thee, exalted for thee, or brought low for thee. Let me be full, let me be empty. Let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and heartily yield all things to thy pleasure and disposal. And now, O glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thou art mine, and I am thine. So be it. And the covenant which I have made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Amen.